the previous ones so far. Awesome. Hopefully it's been beneficial for you. So we've had local law enforcement, federal law enforcement, and today we're going to touch on the topic of courts within the criminal justice system. And we're doing that for a couple different reasons. So one reason is fairly obvious. It's to give you guys kind of an insight, an inside look into what different professions there are within the court realm. But not only that, but to see, the paths that are required to get there, the steps that you need to start setting your mind towards, the goals that you need to start setting your mind towards as you pursue your passions. The other reason why we have panelists here to talk to you today is because we want to break down some of the barriers, or some of the misconceptions, I should say, about what it may be to work within the court field. So maybe you're thinking just lawyer, maybe you think just judge, maybe some of you even think outside the box and think of a bailiff or a court reporter or something like that. So we have three different panelists that are in pretty different roles. Maybe they have crossed roles at some point or another, but pretty different roles where they're at now. And hopefully that'll give you some insights into the different avenues you can take if you do have an interest in the court system. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists, then I'll let them talk about their own roles, what they do, how they got where they got. Then I will ask some questions of them, and then after that, you guys can ask some questions of them. So we'll start off down here. So our first panelist is Shani Ziegler. She's with the Arizona Justice Project. Sitting next to her is Honorable Judge Kevin Kane with the Tempe Municipal Court. And then next to him at the end there is Katherine Nelson, Assistant Prosecutor with the City of Phoenix Prosecutor's Office. So I guess we'll just start down here with you.
Cool intro. My name is Shani Ziegler. I work at the Arizona Justice Project. I'm our operations director. So I'm not an attorney, I'm not a lawyer. I did not go to law school. I'm not a paralegal. So it's kind of an odd fit for me to be here, but hopefully I'll wiggle my way in. The Arizona Justice Project is a nonprofit. We've been around for about 22 years now. We work within the court system. We work with people who have a claim of innocence. So people who are in prison will write into us, say it wasn't me, I didn't do it, and we will do post-conviction work on criminal cases from here in Arizona. So we'll do DNA testing, investigation, things like that, and hopefully find a way back into court to prove innocence or not in some cases.
So I'll start from current and go back a little bit. I'm the presiding judge of the Tempe Municipal Court. Municipal courts deal primarily with misdemeanor criminal offenses. We also issue injunctions and orders of protection and deal with civil traffic. So we see a lot of your fellow students in Tempe who may have partied a little too much on Mill Avenue. Part of my duties involve administrative work since I'm the presiding judge. So I have half a docket of criminal cases, and then the rest of the time is devoted to administration of the court. I've been the presiding judge for approximately 3 years. Prior to that, I was a judge in Phoenix Municipal Court for 10 years. And prior to that, I was the staff attorney for the Phoenix Municipal Court for 11 and a half years. And before that, I was the public defender for Cochise County for 2 years, and then in private practice for that.
My name is Kate Nelson, or Katherine Nelson. Right now, I am at the City of Phoenix Prosecutor's Office. I've been there for a little over 3 years. I am an ASU grad. Out of ASU, I became a victim advocate with a nonprofit organization, and it was under a grant. So that let me work as a court victim advocate with the Domestic Violence Probation Unit of Maricopa County Adult Probation Department. So I spent a lot of time in the court assisting victims and being that liaison during post-conviction hearings, probation violations, and some pretty serious cases. It was all felonies, going up from the classics up to murder cases. After that, I went to law school up in Washington State, and then I kind of knew all the way through my undergraduate and my externships and internships and volunteerism that prosecution is what I wanted to do. So I found myself over at Maricopa County Attorney's Office for a little while. I tried private for a little bit, representing law enforcement and civil litigation, and then found my way over to the City of Phoenix, which I absolutely love. I prosecute all misdemeanors. Sometimes we may do conflict cases for county, Maricopa County, and my specialty, or I specialize in the areas of animal cruelty, and my background is more domestic violence, and there's quite a lot of crossover. Sometimes our cases also involve civil offenses that are kind of attached to the criminal ones, but generally it's just a class 3 to 1.
Great, thank you very much. So what I'll do now is I prepared some questions to ask our panelists that I think will be valuable to the students here, and give you guys some insight again into the things that you should be focusing on, or the things that you should be looking into if in fact you do think you have a future in one of these professions, or in one of the professions we talked about. And then I'll open it up to any questions you guys might have that may have sprung up while you were listening. So what I'll do is I'll start with Shawnee, but I won't start every question with Shawnee, so that she doesn't steal all the good answers, and so that she doesn't always have to go first. So we'll start with Shawnee on this one, but we will give everybody the chance to answer each and every one of these. So the first question is a college degree a requirement to work in your field? And if so, what advice do you have when students ask you what kind of degree they should be pursuing at the undergraduate level first and then beyond?
So it's a little different for me since we're in the nonprofit realm. And so, we have undergraduate interns that we work with, and a lot of them will, are from varying fields, and some of them want to go into law, some of them don't, some of them just want to do criminal justice in general, and what does that look like? So some great, policy is a great one. So if you want to work on policy stuff around criminal justice, of undergrads in that field. We work actually with a lot of sociology students who want to do kind of research and data and statistics on, criminal behavior and what's working and what's not working in terms of rehabilitation and the courts and things like that. So I don't think you have to have one either, but there's so many different things you can go into. So sociology, policy stuff, and then a lot of criminal justice majors, but.
So to be a municipal court judge in Arizona, you have to have a law degree. And it also is required that you have at least 5 years membership in the Arizona State Bar. So you have to have some legal experience before you would be considered as a judge. Now, different municipalities may vary a little bit from that, but generally that's the case. It's true of Phoenix Municipal Court, also true of Tempe. So if you're interested in being a judge, you can go that route by getting a law degree and getting experience probably in criminal law, and that can be as a prosecutor or a defense attorney. But it isn't a requirement that you have experience in criminal law. We have a two kind of tiered limited jurisdiction court program in Arizona. There's the municipal courts, and then there's the justice of the peace courts. They both have similar jurisdictions, except that justice of the peace courts also hear landlord-tenant, small claims, civil proceedings that the municipal courts do not hear. And justices of the peace do not have to be lawyers. They run for election. They're elected for 4-year terms. So you run a campaign and you are elected by the constituents in the precinct that you decide you want to run in. And there are approximately 25 different precincts of justice courts in Maricopa County, and equally about that many municipal courts. So it just depends on which route you would want to take if you want to go right to being a judge. Either way, it's kind of a political appointment or election. Even when you're selected for a municipal court position as a lawyer, you are typically appointed by the mayor and city council, and there's a merit weeding out process that you go through. Typically, a municipal appointment would require that you be interviewed by a judicial advisory council or committee that would make recommendations to the city council. But you again have to be an attorney with 5 years experience, typically, be considered as a municipal court judge. You don't have to be a lawyer, as I said, to be a justice. You just have to be a good politician and get elected.
Yes, all of that. For just being an attorney, variety of, gosh, I think you can have any kind of undergraduate degree to apply for law school and take the LSAT. My husband is a Spanish or was a Spanish major, and he went to law school. I think he was trying to figure out, well, what do? I could be a Spanish teacher, and then what? And I think it was between law school and before, so the law school route. If you are interested in being an attorney, but not criminal or maybe some kind of specialty area like a patent attorney, you have to have an undergrad degree that is science-based. So not just a Bachelor of Science, but like biology, that. But for other positions in the court system, we work with a lot of legal assistants or paralegals. I think the private firms generally call them paralegals. We use the name or the legal assistant, and they do a lot of investigation in our cases, a lot of follow-up. I know that paralegals, I think they can have a certificate. You can go get a certificate. Most of them, I think, have undergraduate degrees. And some folks started in the city right when they turned 18 and went to college or didn't go to college and went to graduate school or maybe not, and just worked their way up and acquired the skill set to move laterally and vertically throughout the city. For the probation officers who I've worked with before, or like county had or has pretrial services, I think that's what it's called, where folks who they might be concerned are consuming alcohol or might leave a certain jurisdiction may wear ankle monitors that are GPS devices or something that we call SCRAM, which detects alcohol through the skin. A lot of the people I worked with in probation and pretrial services had criminal justice backgrounds, but it's not necessary. It's helpful, I think.
Very well.
Could I just jump in and just add, I should mention this, that courts do have staff that are not lawyers and not judges. We in Tempe have a total of 40 employees, 5 judges, and then the rest are staff, various levels. We have a court administrator, an assistant or a deputy court administrator, and then others who serve as, we call them court service specialists and bailiffs. And to get those positions, mostly all you need to do is have good communication skills and be able to process documents and data on computers. You would work with court files, with customer service, work the phones for people who call to have questions about their cases. So there's those opportunities as well. And I know in Phoenix, it's a much larger court. There's approximately 20 judges full-time now, and about 250 employees that do similar things that I described, bailiffs or customer service specialists.
It makes me think that also doing technology or computer programming, we rely so heavily. I think all of our professions on databases and platforms that can help us navigate cases and information digitally across the office without run over. That's quite a process.
And we work closely with social work students who are wanting to get into mitigation or victim advocacy work, and so that's another option too, kind of within criminal justice.
Great. Okay, we'll start actually with Katherine on this one. So in addition to education, experience is also very important. And the reason I jumped on you because you mentioned internships and externships. So experience is also a very important aspect of getting a career in the legal field. What things should a student be doing now while in college to give them the best chance at career success after graduation?
I personally think, and this might be biased, that internships, externships, volunteer positions is incredibly important. It helps you make connections with professionals, with organizations. But when it comes down to it, you know, a lot of us have to have full-time jobs, or we have families when we're in undergrad, and that might not be that might not be possible. You might have to maintain a job like a bank or somewhere else to support yourself instead of work for free at a nonprofit organization. Any time that you can put in, whether it's on a weekend or it's passing out flyers or manning a booth, I think is important. I started my volunteerism with it was a peer counseling group that did suicide prevention, addressed domestic violence, street crime, kids who were runaways, and it was just one day, I think it was one day a week or possibly at one point one day a month. And that opened up all of these other opportunities to go to DC to do public policy work, addressing domestic violence and the criminal justice system, justice reform, things like that. So it kept opening things up, and from there, I had enough, barely enough, to get an internship at the AG's office, and it just kind of snowballed. And so it can be very difficult, but taking advantage of those little opportunities for identifying how much free time you have, or what your skill set is, what your background is, and offer that to an organization, any free time that you could give them, they could work with, because everyone needs help. So these nonprofits, are sometimes kind of like a skeleton crew, like they're just operating on a low budget, and they are looking for people to assist as well. With externships, there are businesses, law firms that have paid positions. If you're interested in getting involved in the courts, you start as a bailiff or apply for a part-time position somewhere, even filing case files or something like that to get your shoe in, because those connections are very beneficial. I hated in undergrad when people were like network, because I'm so uncomfortable with like the concept of just standing around with a bunch of people that I don't know, and I'm supposed to spark up a conversation and not be weird about it. That was really hard for me. So being able to make individual connections and talk with them and ask, do you know anybody? I'm interested in this field. That really helped me, and I felt like it gave me it was in my comfort zone so that I could really be myself and keep moving in the direction I was interested in. ASU helped me get connected with the organization in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, I couldn't, I think at that time I couldn't afford the credits out of pocket, something like that. So I ended up just going over on my own and still connecting with a different organization that they put me in contact with other folks. So they were able to still have the experience, and they gave me a stipend, which was really helpful. And then, do you have a family member who can put me up for 2 months so I can do this externship, to friends and family, and just trying to find somewhere to stay. That's how I ended up doing it. College, it's so easy to get stuck in just doing the classes in law school. It feels impossible to do anything except for study. You just study and read, study and read, study and read. If you decide to go to law school, the experiences during law school, I think, are also crucial because it's not really an experiential program. I think there's only a couple that do that, but for the most part, it's just purely academic. And so folks get out of law school and they're like, I don't even know how to file a motion. Like, what is this business? How do I get into the court? So having those experiences through, if you decide to go the law school route, will benefit you a lot as well.
I agree with Katherine. I think externships or internships are available if you're interested in them. I know the city of Phoenix Prosecutor's Office has externships. Also have, and I don't know if it's the same or are different, but I know that they have law students that will come and actually try cases and work under your supervision, correct?
Yes, thank you. I don't know why I blocked that.
No, that's okay.
I'm a mentor for an extern, so I'm not really sure why I failed to mention that. But it's not just attorneys who can, or law students who under Rule 38 can practice under a mentorship is also goes for helping us do mediation with dog barking cases, stuff like that.
Sure. And we have a similar program, I know, at the Tempe Prosecutor's Office. In addition, and I'm not going to get the title right or the college name right, but is there a College of Social Transformation? Is that a college at ASU? So under that college umbrella, a professor in the criminal justice area of that college named Greg Broberg is sponsoring students in internships with the Tempe Municipal Court, where they come, they do certain projects for our court. One is looking into ways to better measure the success of our treatment courts. We have a veterans court and a mental health court, and that's part of their curriculum. They get college credit for it, and they work with us. They don't get paid, but again, they get college credit for the work they do under Professor Broberg. And so we have 5 students working for us in Tempe right now, working on special projects. So there's those opportunities. Just looking for a job at a law firm, even as a clerk, I think it gives you a lot of great exposure to lawyers and will help you get a sense about whether being a lawyer is something you'd be interested in. It doesn't just have to be a prosecutor's office. Private law firms can give you that same exposure. You can visit courts. Courts are always open to the public, so you can go and sit and watch a trial and see what lawyers do. I would not recommend that you make up an impression about what being a judge is by watching Judge Judy or Law and Order necessarily on television. But you can go anytime during the week, during regular business hours, and watch a trial right down here at Superior Court or Phoenix Municipal Court. They're close by. Come out to Tempe, and you get a real good sense of what lawyers do by sitting in and observing. So I'd encourage you to do that. Let me see. Anything else? I think that's about it.
Agreed. Everything May said. Networking is extremely, extremely important, and it's not always fun. But the more people you know, the more opportunities you hear about, the more you get to write a name on your resume, which is always important. So as much as you dislike it, just network. Show up at events. Be relentless if you want an internship. Like we only have a few undergrad spots, but if you're going to show up at our events and you're going to call me and ask to get involved, then I'm going to know you're interested and serious about it. And I was going to say, just that's what you said. Go down and go observe. I mean, it's really kind of amazing. Everything you can learn just by going and observing a few. So,
and any opportunity you have to get some experience in volunteering or even a part-time job where you can have a mentor talk about your work ethic and about your communication skills and write a letter of recommendation for you will help you move up the ladder. Because anyone we hire at Tempe Municipal Court needs to be somebody who has a record of good work ethic. They show up to work, that they're able to communicate, they're able to follow instructions and get along with a team of other fellow employees. That's the kind of thing we're looking for when we hire.
And that's actually a perfect segue into the next question, which I'll start with you, Judge Kane. This question is originally tailored towards the panelists for law enforcement, but I'll tell you where I'm going at with it. So the background check process is a very important step in working in many areas of criminal justice. Is this the case within your field? And if so, what advice would you give to students regarding decisions and overall patterns of behavior as they navigate through their college years? And again, initially with law enforcement, that's obvious enough. They're long background check processes and things like that, which I'm sure your employers have as well. But you mentioned work ethic and other things that I'm sure from an ethics standpoint, being in the legal field, are very, very important to employers as they go down that path.
Sure, I'm guessing most organizations in the private sector as well as the public sector require background checks. 10-print fingerprint card with FBI background checks is something I think that most everyone you'll find will require. Certainly Tempe does, I know Phoenix does. And initially when you're hired, you're also typically typically required to submit to a drug test. After you're hired, unless there are unless there are issues about your performance, I don't know that you have to be subjected to periodic or random drug tests, but a background check, including a drug test, is typically required as a contingency for being hired initially. So, and with respect to background checks, if you had some legal issues in your past, that's something that will come up. That may not be a disqualifier, I think more so in law enforcement if you're a sworn police officer, but with the court, it's something that you should be able to at least explain and show how you may have been rehabilitated from whatever that negative legal experience may have been on your record. But it's important to think about your history and what might come up in a background check. Also, you need to know, and I'm sure you've probably heard this before, social media is an area where employers will check and see what might be on a Facebook page of yours, on your, what do they call it, your wall, or I'm not.
Yeah.
What do you call it? That. Yeah. I don't do it. Judge, it's pretty dangerous for judges to have Facebook pages. But so social media is something you need to be careful about and think about. Would you want a future potential employer to look at things that you post? So think about those things.
It's hard, I think, being a college student and being young and having to pass on experiences that maybe you think, well, everyone does it. It's just this one time, or it's just a house party. No one's going to get called to it, something like that. But there are a lot of repercussions. So I have a friend who wanted to do an externship or an internship with Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Actually, no, that might not have been it. It was a county in Arizona, and this friend did wonderfully in the last 3 or 4 years, but had a couple drinking tickets from U of A, I think, definitely not ASU, and I think even those tickets were set aside because Arizona doesn't expunge criminal convictions, but they do set them aside. That prevented this friend from getting an externship that this person really, really wanted, and that they were otherwise a really great candidate for. But this person went to a lot of parties, and probably U of A, I don't know. And that was haunting and difficult. That person passed the bar, but even though those things were set aside, the person still had to disclose all of that to the bar. And that the bar also, if you want to be an attorney, and the bar does a very thorough background check. You have to disclose everything. I can't remember if it's like speeding tickets or parking tickets. That might be part of it too.
It is. I know in Tempe and Phoenix, at least with the courts, you're required to disclose any criminal charge and any traffic citations other than parking. And if you don't disclose them, they will probably show up on your criminal history record anyway. And so most likely a potential employer would determine that you're not being truthful, and therefore they would not take you any further in consideration process. So it's important to be careful about what you do. And if you do something that you aren't proud of, make sure you disclose it and have a way to explain it, because it will be found out.
And I think there's a lot that goes towards someone's credibility and integrity when you fall on your own sword and you say, I made some poor life choices, but this is how I learned from that, and these are the decisions I've made since then. Another, if you are an attorney, you can lose your license, or you can be put on probation if you do something that's egregious. Even if it's not a crime, but it's a substance abuse issue that is affecting your work. Other things, thinking about the situations that you're in and making decisions when you're faced with them, like street racing. A lot of teenagers or young adults, want to live like the fast and furious lifestyle, And they think, oh, well, I'm just watching, I'm not participating, I'm not driving the car, I'm just going to go because I know that they're doing this here and there was some kind of like shout out or whatever it is on social media, so I'm just going to go. You're participating in street racing. And street racing is a class of misdemeanor. I can't remember the statute off the top of my head. But, you know, that could be a problem and that could prevent you from achieving your goals. So, you know, ask yourself, is the decision that I'm about to make, is this going to prevent me from a career that I love or a path that makes me happy? And it's, you know, it's hard to make the tough decisions, especially when it might not be like the full decision or something like that. But it's important because they haunt you. They really do.
Yes, there are consequences to our actions, and we are also working on second chances and box and owning our mistakes. And everyone makes mistakes and not being defined by those mistakes. So, us as an organization, we do. I mean, for internships and things like that, we go and do legal visits. So if there was specific things in your background that would prevent you from passing the background check for the legal visits, then you just wouldn't be able to attend those. But other than that.
You're going to get a bunch of applications.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, the last question I had for you is more surrounding the expectations of somebody who chooses to go down this path. Like you said, don't believe what you see on TV, you know, experience it. So I think the last thing that an employer wants is an employee who gets there and decides that, oh my gosh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I don't want to be here. And the last thing you guys want is the exact same experience. You don't want to have pursued this and realize that it's not what you thought it was going to be. So the last question I have is, working in the legal system is often known as a very hard-working profession, whether it be a lot of schooling, whether it be long hours, whether it be emotionally draining. Can you speak to the commitment one must have to endure a lengthy career, particularly as it relates to life outside of work, and how sometimes your life outside of work and your work life may intersect one another?
I mean, that's really the important part of doing internships and externships and volunteering, is so that you can kind of see day to day what it's like. And you can look towards people who've worked there for 10 or 15, 20 years, and what is their, you know, what is it like to be there? So that's the important of the internship. But it's tough. You have to have work-life balance in anything and everything you do. I think it's, you know, being an attorney, being a judge, it's hard to hear some cases over and over. They're tough. They're not easy. It's a lot of sadness and things that you see on a day-to-day basis that happens in society. And so being able to know how to deal with that. And I think it's a generation really concerning about self-care, which is great. And so learning how to deal with what you deal with on a day-to-day basis, and how do you work through those things. And so
I'd have to imagine at the Justice Project that there are cases that come up that people get very emotionally invested in, and they don't always go the way you intended them to. So how do you, either you or your coworkers or just everybody on staff there, deal with things like that? So I would imagine just working in that field in general, you have to be quite passionate about what it is that you're doing.
You have cases that you love and you get invested in, and there's conclusive evidence of guilt, and that makes you very sad. Or conclusive cases of innocence, and then you're excited too. We do a lot of just like debriefs after losses in court or losses at parole board or whatever it may be. So just processing through what we've been through and a way to move forward with that. We talk about secondary trauma and vicarious trauma and what that is and how that affects you, and learning how to capture those negative thoughts in your day-to-day life. And a lot of attorneys deal with addiction because it's kind of an easy road between dealing with trauma every day and learning how to work through that in your personal life as well. So it's a lot of talking about it, being okay to talk about it, being okay to say this case really affected me, and when I go home every night, I have to check my windows 10 times because I read a crazy case, things like that. And so it's just a lot of being willing to talk through whatever it is.
So just to piggyback on what Shauna has said, if any of you have not had an opportunity to look into what her organization organization does, and Innocence Projects over the entire country, although there are a lot of challenging cases, there are great rewards from finding people who have been condemned to death or life in prison who are exonerated through DNA evidence or otherwise. It's hugely rewarding, I'm sure. And by the same token, as a judge, it weighs heavily on me to try to determine guilt or innocence. I'll have to say that as many times as I've held what we call bench trials, where I'm the finder of fact, I'm the one who determines guilt or innocence, rather than the jury, it's seldom that I'm 100% sure one way or the other. And so that weighs heavy on you. And even though the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, it's sometimes difficult to determine where that line is. And so it sometimes haunts me. If I'm not, if there's something in the facts of a case that make me a little unsure, I'll err on the side of finding someone not guilty rather than convict somebody who may be innocent. So although the hours of public servants and judges are typically pretty regular, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday jobs, sometimes we take home our cases, at least in our hearts and minds, because we aren't sure and they're difficult and you have to make the decision. The one thing about being a judge that's interesting is that you have to try to be right. Where you are a prosecutor or a defense attorney in the criminal sector, you're an advocate for a particular side. You have certain ethical standards that you must follow, but you're promoting a particular side of the case. It's your job to advocate for that side and present evidence to support your side. The judge has to be right, has to make the right decision. So it's challenging. Private practice is different, and perhaps Katherine can talk about that because she's been in private practice a bit. Oftentimes you're saddled with dealing with billable hours and your production with the law firm and what kind of business you're bringing in. That may cause you to have to spend a lot more than just regular 8 to 5 Monday through Friday time. But it also gives you experience, and the financial rewards may be greater. So it just depends on what you want for your lifestyle. And sometimes it's good to experience private practice first to get an appreciation for that before you go into the public sector. But you can always find opportunities in the legal profession that would meet whatever lifestyle and work-life balance you want to have. But again, I think it's important to talk to lawyers. My impression is that most every lawyer will be happy to talk to you about their profession, their experiences, and learn from them and observe, and then it'll help you better decide what's good for you.
Absolutely. I think this is a good time to give a shout out to our defense attorneys, our court-appointed attorneys, and our public defenders, public advocates. They are amazing, and the financial benefit, I don't think, is the reason why they do what they do. They are very selfless people. They work very hard, and I've never been a defense attorney, criminal defense attorney, so I couldn't tell you what their hours are like, but I imagine that it's probably kind of rough. My hours are, my work-life balance is at a place where I need it to be. Started, a family, I have my little ones, and that's really important to me. I can't do the 80 hours anymore. It's not healthy. But, everyone's lifestyle is different, and there is no shame in putting your employment, being proud of your employment and being a working mom or a working dad, or not a dad or mom, and your career is a part of your identity. That's something you can be proud of. There's absolutely no shame in that. Secondary trauma you mentioned, And I think that's incredibly important. I think there's a couple things that I try to be really conscious about. Secondary trauma, which I didn't know I was experiencing it when I was, and that's a serious thing. And what were the others I mentioned? Identifying and understanding your own biases and implicit bias. Leaving personal opinions and thoughts at home. A prosecutor's job is to have integrity, to be honest, to follow the rules, and personally, I think to be transparent. When I go into trial, my objective is that the defense attorney knows exactly what I'm going to do. Like, I'll tell him how my interviews occur, how my interviews went, and where sometimes even like, look, this is where I think my weakness is. That happened today, where we had a conversation, and I said, oh, look, I had this interview with the witness. They said X, Y, and Z. This is why I'm going to do whatever. So coming back to the secondary trauma part, sorry, I feel like I got off my tangent there. The first couple months, I was reading police reports on death penalty cases. It was very interesting to me. I absorbed it a lot, and then I didn't realize until I started having nightmares, and I started thinking about it more often than was helping for me, that this isn't good. This is not good. And being able to finally go to my supervisor and say, oh man, I don't feel so good. I'm not sleeping well. I feel haunted by this. We were able to talk that out, and she helped me build a tool set to, in a healthy way, compartmentalize what I was reading and to come to terms with that, to leave it at work and not bring it home, not be the only thing that I talk about. And then also to be able to say, this case isn't good for me. We have a lot of people in my office who are like, yeah, animal crimes, nope, I don't want to touch that. I can't handle it. I don't want to hear about it. The photos are upsetting to me, that they project themselves into or think like that could be my dog, or the suffering, and all of these things. And they practice self-care and decide to specialize somewhere else, or to channel their energy into different cases. I think that that's really, really, really important. I'm glad that our generation is more into self-care, and not being ashamed to go to a counselor or talk to friends, or to say, hey, are you in a place right now where I can talk to you about something heavy? To recognize that the people around you may also be dealing with something heavy. I think, and I'm not saying here, I think it must have been on something else that I read, that leaving personal opinions at home.
Oh, yeah.
And to be objective. And if you feel that you're in a position where you cannot advocate properly, that your job requires, you've got to hand it off to someone else, or I can talk to your supervisor about that. That's really, really important. A prosecutor should and a defense, anybody, should be able to identify, we really have to identify where maybe they're just not going to be fair because of something that happened to them before. Maybe it's a DUI case. They don't want to prosecute a DUI case. They were a victim of DUI, or maybe a family member passed away as a result of a drunk driver. And those are questions that we ask jury members as well, to make sure that we have people who are fair and impartial deciding our cases.
Perfect. Well, before I open it up to questions, you mentioned something that reminded me of another question I wanted to ask. It's actually probably a question that Judge Kane can answer best because of his experiences. But in my intro to criminal justice class, right now we're actually talking about the various personnel within a courtroom, and I have a couple of my students in here. And somebody recently asked me something to the effect of, are public defenders as good of judges as others, or why would somebody want to do that, or why would somebody want to go down that path? And I thought it was interesting that you actually started private practice, then went to being a public defender. So I think there's a misconception that somehow that's the bottom of the barrel, and then you try to work your way up. And all the explanations I gave, I thought it would be best to come from someone who's actually done it, been through that
I'll
process.
start, but I'm sure the others can speak to your question as well. Let me begin by just saying I would tell friends about cases when I was defending defendants who may have not had the facts on their side, so to speak. In other words, their case wasn't really a good one to defend. And my friends would say, well, how can you defend somebody that you know is guilty? And I would always respond that the question before the court, before the judge or the jury, is not whether a defendant is guilty or not guilty. It's whether the prosecutor can prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the system. And so my job as a public defender was to make sure that the rules were followed, that the laws were applied accurately, and that justice was done. And that's the prosecutor's job as well. So together, we do our best to present the evidence and to help the trier of fact come up with the truth. But in the end, my job is to make sure that the system is fair for the defendant. I enjoy criminal law in general, so that's what attracted me to being a public defender. Then, as I mentioned, I was the staff attorney for Phoenix Municipal Court for 11 and a half years, so that was mostly court administration. So I had the experience as a criminalist, so to speak, and then as an administrator that gave me the experience to be where I am now, which is judge and an administrator. But I think that the goal of any attorney in the criminal sphere is to make sure that the laws are applied fairly and the rules are applied fairly and that justice is done. And I know I've known prosecutors who have decided not to pursue prosecution on cases where the facts just weren't there or they knew they couldn't prove it, even though they may have thought that the defendant may be guilty. But the job of the prosecutor is to see that justice is done. So is it for the public defender or criminal defense attorney? My view of court-appointed attorneys or public defenders is that in many cases, they're better equipped to represent defendants in a particular court because they know the prosecutors, they know the judges, they know the process, they try the same, for example, DUIs all the time. We do have special private attorneys who specialize in DUI representation, but the public defenders do that day in and day out, so they know what to expect. They have a good sense, typically if they've had some experience, as to what a person's case looks like, what the outcome most likely would be. So I think even though sometimes I see defendants who will say that public defenders are not real attorneys, I think for the most part that's erroneous.
And our court-appointed attorneys are actually, we don't have our own public defender office, like a lot of the counties do, and maybe some cities do, I'm not sure. Our defense attorneys who are court-appointed are private attorneys. They have private clients as well as clients that they're assigned for. The most important, well, not the most important part, one of the most, because there's so many just crucial aspects of practice law being involved in any part of the criminal justice system. One of those things is to treat similarly situated people the same. And so it's, does not matter background, age, all race, gender identity, any of those things, anything you can think of. We need to treat similarly situated people the same, and then take into consideration mitigating and aggravating factors based on issue. And all of the defense attorneys, really, who I've had the pleasure of working with, they're fantastic advocates. They're very smart. Several of them have said that well, as mentioned to me at least, that they it keeps them sharp and challenging, and being able to work with the courts directly instead of just having a private client.
We were on the defense side. just because of our work. And so, I mean, yeah, a lot of who we work with is public defenders. And I mean, they do it because they love it, and you can't have a just system without both sides. And that's the way that our system was created. So, yeah, I watched a lot of SVU, and I asked those same questions, like, why would you be a defense attorney? And then I came here, and yeah, you have to have both sides, and that's the way system should work. And there's always there's bad apples in every profession, no matter where you're at. So it just depends on.
Great.
Let me just add too that with respect to judges in general, and this is at the municipal court level, Superior Court, Court of Appeals, and Supreme Court, we in Arizona put a great emphasis on diversity. I think it's fair to say, and when I say we, the bench, the Arizona Supreme Court, those who help recruit individuals to apply for judgeships, want diversity. So getting life experiences and bringing those to the table are important. And I think city councils, governor's office who appoints folks to the Superior Court and the appellate court, they want judges who are going to reflect the face of the community. Not that it's thought that an individual should have a judge who is from their same background. But when any individual who's charged with a criminal offense and is before the court at least knows that there are judges on that bench who may have similar life experiences that they share with their fellow judges, it just brings a sense of, a greater sense of fairness and that they will be understood. So just understand that if you have a diverse background, that's a plus in the criminal justice system and on the bench.
All right, any questions?
After like, because that's a prospective lawsuit, and anyone can answer this question, I guess, why should I be a prosecutor as opposed to a defense attorney or vice versa? And specifically, the reason why I ask is there's some sort of stigma towards defense attorneys. There's just stereotypes, I guess, that they're a bad guy. Why would someone choose?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't even know how to answer that. One of the things I imagine, and I don't want to put words in my mouth, that people pick public defense for social justice reform, criminal justice reform, to make an impact, to represent folks who just they're good people and they made a mistake, or maybe they didn't make a mistake, and they need a zealous advocate, someone who will advocate for them and not just say like, this is going to be a really long trial and cost a lot of money, and I really don't want to do all the investigations. You have a lot of prosecutors too, and what I love about misdemeanor work is I encounter so many just good people who are in front of me as defendants who was made a bad choice, in a bad situation. And I think being a prosecutor, likewise, I can use the tools available to me to encourage people to remain law-abiding, to give people diversion opportunities to earn a dismissal, to do community service, to correct the path that they're on, to go in a better direction. And then, see them again when they ask for their conviction to be set aside, and to address that then. If you have people who are wholeheartedly prosecutors, like it just happened, like saying, there's bad apples no matter what profession that you're in. I wish it weren't the case, but I know it has to be, right? That there's prosecutors who, no matter what they're reading, they're just reading in a light that being guilty, they have to be there somewhere. And same with defense attorneys, no matter what they read, this person is innocent. They said that it's innocent, even though it is super clear to an objective person that they weren't. Maybe that motivates people to choose the path that they do. But both are so unbelievably rewarding, and you get to help people get through life challenges, and no matter what position that you take. Being a prosecutor, you also get to work with victims, especially on the misdemeanor too, and also felony. With domestic violence, for instance, by the time I see someone in our court as a victim of domestic violence, a lot of the time, this is not the first time that they've encountered violence. And it's also an opportunity for me as a prosecutor to intervene and provide resources to make sure that they feel supported, that they're safe, that there are consequences and court orders or probation terms that put them in the best possible situation that at least I can do or help with to make sure that they're okay. So I got into it mostly because of victims, the victim work that I had done before and how rewarding that is. But I'll tell you that I've been in situations where victims have been mad at me and upset, saying, you know, you could have done better, or they should have gone to jail, or I didn't. This happens too, it's a cycle of violence. I didn't want you to prosecute this case. You ruined my life. It's hard, even though that's why I got into it. It's really challenging.
I would say if you're not sure, go intern at the public defender's office, go intern at the county attorney's office to see which one you like more. County attorneys hold a ton of power. They get to decide, what their charge is, kind of a deal. A lot of the public defenders that I have worked with got into it because they see the disparities in the system, and that's how they feel like they can make the biggest change. Intern at both and see what you like.
I think it depends a lot on what your personality is.
Yeah.
There are stereotypes or stigmas with prosecutors, just as there are with defense attorneys. And so I think it has to be what you think fits your personality. But there are just as many people who are passionate about seeing that justice is done and that the system is fair on both sides. And let me just say, too, that the wave of the future, especially with the limited jurisdiction courts, is to move towards treatment courts. The job of a court and a judge is to hold people responsible for their conduct. But that doesn't mean that the traditional punishment always works, because we're also responsible for reducing recidivism and breaking that cycle. So just to use jail or fines as the sanction doesn't work. It might be, if I get pulled over for a DUI, heaven forbid, it may be easier for me to write a check and go spend a day in jail than somebody who's trying to hold down a job and feed 3 kids at home and is living paycheck to paycheck. So the goal of the courts more and more is to help people break the cycle. So if we have a mental health court, for example, in Tempe, if people are seriously mentally ill and that's contributing to their legal issues, just putting them in jail is not going to accomplish anything. They're just going to be back. So we try to connect them with treatment and services. Same with our veterans court, same thing. We want to help people get the services and treatment they need, whether it be post-traumatic stress, whether it be addiction, whether it be just mental health treatment, to help them, hold them accountable, but help them break that cycle so that we reduce the repeat offenders.
That's like obvious, because as a prospective student that are thinking of going to law school, you talked about how the exposure that you have in undergrad is very important. Especially like in my situation, as a senior, I had to wait a semester if I didn't want to go to ASU law. Would you recommend that you instead go more back to the actual field, go to the workforce, then work your time there, start the actual state, city, the different jurisdictions, and then come back to law school after a year, or would you recommend that more just take a semester and then come back?
I'll just say that I know from my fellow law students and for myself, I had no idea what kind of law I wanted to practice when I started law school. And you really learn about what the law is about and the different areas of law that you can work in after you've maybe been in law school for a year. You could do that the other way too, and that is get experience and then know that you want to be a lawyer and specifically what you want to do by being an intern before you choose law school. You could do it either way. So I think it just depends on you.
Yeah, so whatever your financial situation is, if you can, if you want to work for a year first because you need to earn some money, then work for a year and find a law firm or something like that and figure it out, or just intern. But I think it depends on what you would prefer to do.
And I think you can go wrong either way.
Yeah.
If someone asks you why you made the decision that you did, I would think that explaining that reasoning is strength. I took a break. I took a break longer than I anticipated because I was like, I'm going to get a year's worth of experience. And I'm going to take the LSAT and it's going to be great. And I got my score back and I was like, oh gosh, this doesn't look so awesome. I'm going to try again and it's going to be different this time. And it was 1 point different, I think. And so I ended up being in the workforce between graduating and going to law school longer than I anticipated. It worked out really well for me, but I had to save up enough money to go. And I know a lot of people who went straight through. I know a lot of people who didn't do any experience or have any experiential opportunities or take advantage of them in undergrad, went straight to law school, and they're doing really, really well. I think just one of the hardest things about life is just not knowing what the decision is. The best decision is then we do our best and we can explain why. And as long as you're doing it in integrity, right, and you're making this fit your life the best, that's the most important part.
I want to get to these two hands real quick, but I do want you guys to be aware that it is past 6:30, so if you have to go. Okay. More questions? Okay, let's go to the floor.
What was the second half of that?
Can you have other jobs while being an attorney, or can you be a part-time attorney?
So if you work for government, you have to disclose any part-time jobs, like if you want to be a real estate attorney on the side or run, a side hustle like Arbonne or something like that. I think with any government position, you need to disclose that. And I think get permission. I might be wrong. To make sure that there's not going to be any kind of conflict, because we need to be fair and not run into a situation where one of your clients, your real estate clients, becomes a defendant or something like that, and then
if you're doing private practice, it's all on you.
Yeah.
I know a lot of private practice attorneys who also do policy on the side, so that's kind of they do both, and then take on cases when the legislative session is out and do more cases then, and then take less. But
And a legal education doesn't limit you to practicing law. There's so many things you can go into. That you can be a corporate officer. You can be an administrator in business. So law school really gives you a broad education and exposure to let you go into many kinds of professions. You're not just limited to practicing law. Do you agree?
yes, absolutely. And you can also work part-time if that is the right kind of balance for you. Absolutely. There are defense attorneys who do appellate work and work part-time, or prosecutors who have contracts with cities or jurisdictions where they work 1, 2, or 3 days a week, or they do a job share. A lot of organizations and government do provide opportunities for job share or flexing or working from home.
Can you quit and then come back later?
As an attorney or as a prosecutor? As an attorney, you can certainly put your bar license on hold. I think that go into inactive status. You do have to pay bar fees every year. They can be kind of crazy. most of the time your employer will pay for that for you, but you can definitely go on inactive status. Yeah, and come back.
We'll go with one more question back here, and then if anybody didn't get a question answered, maybe you can exchange contact information or something. So.
Well, I think you could start with the City of Phoenix Prosecutor's Office. Ask about internships or externships. Come to Tempe. Any law firm, I would think, would love to have volunteers, which I think would eventually, if you do a good job and are committed, could work into a paying position. If you're going to law school, doing summer internships, typically you can get some kind of a stipend or pay for that. I would recommend that you just write some letters to law firms and ask if they have any positions open. Start with a volunteer position, and I'm quite certain that most every law firm would welcome someone who's dedicated and interested in the law to come and work with them.
Absolutely. I think generally lawyers we like to talk. And so if you just find someone and say, I don't even know where to start, here's my interest, or let them ask you some questions. Just start the conversation somewhere. I imagine, at least I did feel very overwhelmed by but where do I start? There's so many options. There's so many organizations. I don't even know where to go. Who do I call? Oh my gosh. And then I just kind of shut down and don't do the thing. Just pick a person and make a phone call. And it can be a completely random organization. If you're interested in prosecution or victim support, victim advocacy, call the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence or the Arizona Coalition or Sojourner or Chrysalis, or just Google it, call and say, I'm a student and I want to get involved. I don't even know where to start. Would someone talk to me? Almost everyone I know would say, absolutely. Let's grab coffee, or we can talk on the phone or exchange emails, or come shadow. There was I remember a person who, a couple people who just shadowed prosecutors in our office to see if it was even something they were interested in. Because learning what you don't want to do, I think, can be just as important as learning what you do want to do. And just ask to follow along.
AC has a list, right? I mean, I think they have a big list of internship places that you can look through, and the law school does too. So I think if you even walk over there, they'll
Or
give you a
Google it,
list
I'm
of
guessing. There would be
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
there would be
there's so
plenty of
many.
opportunities if you just Google legal opportunities, volunteer opportunities in the legal profession.
Yeah.
Whatever you would use, you could find lots of places you could go and inquire.
Yeah, speaking from my role with the internship program here in criminal justice, you'd be surprised at the number of places that tell me that nobody ever calls and says things like that. And so when somebody does, it really speaks volumes to them. And somebody took the initiative to call them and say, hey, I want to come and volunteer with you. And it really helps out a lot. So. Well, great. Thank you very much for your time here. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for coming. You don't need
I use the meter, I'm fine.